Konstantin, we've talked about some of the other major problems in the Eastern world, and the war in Georgia was obviously a very, very big deal across the world, in places like Abkhazia and South Ossetia. What did Putin in particular wish to gain there, and what are they thinking? What are their motives in the future?
The main motive, which has not been understood here in America at enough extent or enough, is that their main goal is dismiss America from Georgia, and Putin has succeeded in it. He has dismissed already America from two republics in Georgia. It's Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Abkhazia is the maybe best place of Georgia. It's the pearl of Georgia, and now it has been changed into a mammoth Russian basis of espionage addressed to America and Russian military based, damaging American interests in the Black Sea. Further, Putin will be aiming the further dismissal of America from Georgia and from the whole of the post-Soviet territories.
Now, when you talk about taking America, is that out of that area? Is that American influence that you're speaking to?
Yes, American influence. Putin wants America to acknowledge that the former republics of the Soviet Union and maybe with East Europe too are still spheres of state interests in Russia,
Like Kazakhstan, or Uzbekistan, and so forth. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe one of concessions of Obama will be that acknowledgement, and we should take into consideration the fact that today's Russian leadership has a mafia psychology because they're building mafia capitalism. What does it mean? In mafia, from the point of view of mafia, when somebody makes you a concession, you can react in only one way, furthering pressure, because the man or side which is making concession in the mafia way of view is considered a loser, a fool, a defector.
Yes.
He should, the defeated person, he should be oppressed more and more. If Obama makes some concession in Russia, it will be to Russia. It will bring only one result. Putin will facilitate his pressure on America more and more.
So they will look at it as a chink in the Western armor.
Yes.
That these people, again, going back to that discussion about the differences between Eastern thinking and Western thinking.
Yes.
In the East, when you concede a point, you have shown you are a weakling, that you cannot, number one, probably be trusted, but number two, that you are not very strong and that you can be pushed harder. So
Yes.
it's just an open invitation to be pushed harder, correct?
Yes. Yes.
It's a point I think that is lost far too often in many of the conflicts and diplomatic operations in many countries in that region.
Yes. And apologizes if Obama apologizes to Russia about something, it will be understood only in one way. We should further increase our pressure.
Now, what about, we've heard so much about the oil pipelines that go through Georgia. How would that affect the former Eastern Bloc nations in Europe? Because I understand they get most of their oil through this pipeline?
Yes, it's also one of the reasons of the war. Russians don't want to lose the control of this pipeline, and only under Putin the oil policy or gas policy became the tool of political blackmail addressed to the West. Fortunately, Putin is understanding that today's West will forgive him everything.
And that basically played out in the Ukraine already.
Yes, yes.
They held basically the Ukraine ransom by not allowing fuel to flow into the country.
Yes. Unfortunately, nowadays, Russian just closed propaganda is spreading in America the following false thesis. Oh, let's yield Georgia and Ukraine to Russia, and Russians will help us in Iran. Russians will never help America in Iran and in any other Islamic country, because the Russia's relations with Islam, with the Islamic countries, are based on anti-Americanism.
And the current crisis in Iran and all of the democratic challenges to what was called an election for Ahmadinejad, What's the Russian motives there? I mean, you had touched on it, but I would like you to elaborate more. What's the reason to keep such a wedge between the West and Iran?
Of course, it's political short-sightedness. Sometimes Russians are ready to victimize their own interests in order to hurt America, in order to undermine America. The hatred of America by Russian political elite, so-called elite, because they're not in fact elite, they're just very illiterate people. So the hatred of America is so much, so fierce, that they are ready for many things, even for the things which are unprofitable for them. This respect should be understood by Americans clearly.
So it's pretty much the same thing that's taking place with the six-party talks that were underway with the North Koreans. So you're telling me now that the Russians are not working for helping the West to keep the Korean Peninsula nuclear free.
Yes, in Russia we have such a proverb: let my house be burnt, by the neighbor's house will be burnt too. So just in this logic, following this logics, Putin is just trying to establish very special relations with North Korea on the anti-American basis. Because, no, in fact, Kim Jong-il, the head of North Korea, is very positive about Russia. Because Stalin has founded his country. If it had not been for Stalin, Kim's father and he himself would never become Russian leaders, and Putin is glorifying Stalin too, which is, by the way, ignored by the West. So just they all like Stalin. They all are worshipping Soviet past. They all want, both of them want Soviet Union to return back. What distinctions could be with them? Why should Putin help West to oppose North Korea? He'll better help North Korea to oppose West.
Now, that brings into the relationship that we touched on earlier between today's Russia and today's China. We know of the rocky roads up and down in the past. What is the current relationship between China and Russia right now?
Putin is very, very positive about China. In the Soviet-Chinese relations, not China is making concession to Russia.
As we talked about the relationship between China and Russia, we also need to talk about the other very large boil that is taking place in Afghanistan and Pakistan with the Taliban and the Swat Valley, and what kind of influence does Russia have on that, the former invader of Afghanistan?
Well, they have as far as I know from Litvinenko, they have very many agents there. There is some Russian influence in this region. For example, Litvinenko told me that one of the previous famous leaders, General Dustum, was a Soviet agent. There are some other Soviet Russian agents there too. The very fact that Russians has afforded closing of American military base in Kyrgyzia, which is intended to oppose such a movement, it shows that they are not so much afraid of Taliban in Afghanistan.
And actually, that would allow me to then, as a Western thinker, to understand that any way to undermine the goals of the Western democracies would be applied through Russian foreign policy.
Yes, Russians' target is to deprive America of its status of the superpower, to lower it to the level of just secondary power. And of course, they want to destroy American democracy, to lower American democracy to the level of the Russian one.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again for your talk.